They say a royal wedding is a promise of peace, but this one was planned as a perfect killing ground. No escape. No mercy. No survivors. In the heart of Valadorn Kingdom, the grandest royal wedding in generations was about to begin. Silk banners danced in the cold wind. Thousands of candles lit the marble hall, and nobles from 7 allied houses arrived dressed in jewels brighter than the sun. But none of them knew that the king wasn't celebrating a union. He was preparing an execution. Princess Alara, the bride, stood trembling behind her veil. She had begged her father, King Aldrich, not to force this marriage, not because she hated the groom, but because she knew the truth. The groom's family, House Thorn, had secretly plotted to overthrow the crown for years. They had assassins hidden in their caravans, poison stored in their rings, and a coup planned for the wedding night. But the king had discovered their plot first. As the music began and the bride walked down the aisle, hidden archers positioned behind the stained glass windows knocked their bows. The king raised his golden chalice, smiled at the unsuspecting crowd, and uttered the signal. 2 new beginnings. The doors slammed shut, the windows burst open, and arrows rained down like a storm sent by the gods. Within seconds, the marble floor turned red. Nobles screamed, knights collapsed, and House Thorn realized too late that the wedding they planned to use for rebellion had been turned into their own funeral. Princess Alara watched in horror as the alliance her marriage was meant to secure drowned in blood. The kingdom celebrated a victory. But the princess knew this was only the beginning of darker things to come. The wedding of Prince Roderick and Lady Moreno was meant to unite 2 powerful kingdoms. The ceremony took place in the Moonhall Cathedral, famous for its echoing silence, a place where even whispers felt like confessions. But that silence became deadly. Hours before the vows,
the High Chancellor discovered that a group of conspirators planned to murder the prince during the exchange of rings.
The killers were elite, trained to strike without sound, masters of the blade who could stab a man and drop him before anyone heard a gasp. So the Chancellor devised a counterplan. As the wedding began, the cathedral was filled with nobles, monks, foreign ambassadors, none aware that the Chancellor's own silent executioners were already in place at the balconies, shadows waiting in stillness. When the time came for the exchange of rings, Morena lifted her trembling hand. But before the prince could touch her fingers, a cloaked assassin stepped forward from the crowd, blade raised. No scream came. No alarm sounded, only the soft thud of bodies. From the balconies, the Chancellor's men descended like falling spirits. Steel flashed in the dim candlelight, slicing through assassins faster than breath. The cathedral's silence swallowed every death. The crowd watched in paralyzed horror as bodies dropped without a single cry. Within minutes, the ambushers lay dead in eerie quiet. The vows continued, but every guest left, knowing one truth that night: silence wasn't holy. Silence was a weapon. The House of Carven had ruled for 3 centuries, but their end began on the day of Princess Leora's wedding.
It was supposed to be a celebration, the joining of 2 noble bloodlines.
Instead, it became the night every historian erased from official records. Leora sensed the tension from the moment she entered the grand hall. Her father, King Varian, smiled too tightly. Her brother's hand rested on his sword far too often, and her groom, Lord Desmond, looked strangely calm, almost rehearsed. By midnight, as dancers spun in circles, Desmond's men quietly took their positions. The plan was simple: kill the king during the final toast, blame it on a rival house, and crown Desmond king by dawn. But Leora made a discovery that changed everything. Moments before the toast, she overheard her groom whispering to his commander.
Betrayed. She ran to warn her father, but it was already too late. The hall's doors burst open.
Desmond's soldiers stormed inside, swords dripping with oil, ready to burn the hall. But the king's personal guards were prepared. They had been tipped off by an anonymous letter written by a jealous noble who wanted to ruin Desmond Desmond's ambitions. What followed was chaos. Tables overturned. Torches fell. Silks ignited. Blood spilled faster than wine. By dawn, both families lay in ruins. Flames devoured Carvain's golden banners, and smoke crawled across the kingdom like a dark omen. The dynasty ended not with a coronation, but with a massacre wearing wedding garlands. Lady Seraphine was cherished by every noble house. Graceful, gentle, almost angelic. Her wedding was hyped as the most beautiful union of the century. But beyond the decorated arches and shimmering candles, a storm of betrayal waited. Unbeknownst to the guests, the bride's uncle Duke Renville planned to wipe out rival families in one swift blow. He saw the wedding as an opportunity to trap every political enemy in one hall. The strategy was brutal. Lock the doors, seal the windows, and set the hall aflame. Seraphine had no idea. As she walked into the hall, everyone rose, smiling, clapping softly, enchanted by her beauty. But the moment she reached the altar, she noticed something strange. Guards at every exit, torches placed too close to drapes, and her uncle whispering orders with a face that looked like carved stone. She realized the trap seconds before it sprung. But she made a choice no one expected. As Duke Renville signaled the guards to lock the doors, Seraphine stepped forward, raised her voice, and exposed the entire plot. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles panicked. Renville, furious, ordered the guards to proceed anyway. Chaos erupted. Guests smashed chairs against doors. Ladies tore down curtains to stop the spreading flames. Knights clashed steel with corrupted guards. Seraphine fought desperately to unlock the main gate before smoke consumed the hall. In the end, half the guests escaped. The other half didn't. Seraphine survived, but her wedding dress remained stained with soot and ashes, a memory she would carry forever. Lord Eric stood at the altar looking calm, but his heartbeats were thunder. He wasn't nervous about marriage. He was terrified of dying. Rumors had reached him weeks earlier. Someone planned to stab him at the altar in front of the entire kingdom. But who? His enemies were many. His jealous cousin, a rejected lover, a rival lord, hungry for power, or maybe someone closer. As the bride, Lady Meleys walked down the long aisle lined with glowing lanterns. Arik felt his stomach twist. She looked beautiful, but her eyes held secrets. He scanned the crowd. Nothing seemed unusual until he spotted a cloaked figure creeping behind a marble pillar, inching toward the altar. Eric's hand moved to his dagger. But before he could act, Meleys reached the altar and whispered without smiling. "Step aside." Confused, he obeyed. In one swift motion, Meleys flipped her bouquet, revealing the steel blade hidden inside. She spun around and blocked the assassin's strike meant for Arik. Gasps erupted as steel clashed with steel. She fought with deadly precision, each movement revealing a truth Arik never imagined. Meleys wasn't just his bride. She was the kingdom's secret protector. A shadow knight trained from childhood. Within seconds, she pinned the assassin to the ground. The crowd erupted in shock, fear, admiration. Arik stared at her, speechless. The wedding continued, but nothing was the same. He was alive because of her. And the real question now was, did she marry him for love? Or because protecting him was part of her oath? The wedding of King Haldan and Lady Roswin was a musical masterpiece. Minstrels played, enchanted flutes, golden harps, and drums that echoed like distant thunder. The music filled the hall with warmth, hiding the sound of murder. Unknown to most, the Royal Musicians Guild had been bribed by a rival kingdom. Their plan was genius. Use the loud, rhythmic music to mask the steps and strikes of assassins who would kill the king mid-ceremony. Roswin sensed something wrong. As she walked beside Haldan, she noticed the musicians exchanging strange nods, tapping fingers in coded signals. Then came the final song, a powerful crescendo that shook the hall. That was the cue. Assassins disguised as performers leaped forward, blades flashing. But they underestimated Roswin. She had been trained in combat since childhood, something her enemies never discovered. She grabbed a fallen spear from a knight, spun it with stunning grace, and struck the first attacker down. Haldan ducked behind her as she fought through the chaos. The musicians desperately played louder to muffle screams, but guards surged in. Within minutes, the plot collapsed. When silence returned, the hall was stained with crimson. Guests trembled. The king survived because the bride he married wasn't a fragile maiden. She was a warrior. Halden looked at her with awe. The kingdom whispered her name for days. And the Musicians' Guild never played again. Lady Eveline had dreamed of her wedding since childhood. A peaceful ceremony. A loving husband. A united kingdom. But the night before her marriage, she discovered a letter that shattered everything. A letter revealing her own fiancé's plan to murder her father, King Farron, during the feast. Lord Cassian had pretended to love her. Pretended loyalty. Pretended devotion.
But his real goal was the throne.
Eveline's heart broke. But she did not collapse. She planned. At the wedding, she walked down the aisle with steady steps, hiding her turmoil. Cassian greeted her with a smile. A smile she now knew was venomous. As vows were exchanged, Cassian's men quietly took positions behind columns, each armed with concealed daggers.
When the feast began,
Eveline lifted her goblet to give her traditional bride's toast. Every eye turned to her.
Even Cassian watched her closely, waiting for the moment to give his deadly signal. Instead, she gave hers. Dozens of armored knights burst from behind the tapestry. In seconds, Cassian's assassins were surrounded. Chaos erupted. Steel clashed, tables overturned. Torchlight flickered wildly across faces filled with fear. Cassian tried to flee, but Eveline blocked his path, sword in hand, a weapon she'd secretly trained with for years. "You should have loved me," she whispered. He lunged. She struck. By the end of the night, Cassian's rebellion lay dead on the marble floor. The wedding hall smelled of smoke, wine, and blood. Eveline stood victorious, a bride no longer innocent, but forged in betrayal. The great feast of Crownfall was legendary, a celebration meant to unite every noble house under one banner. Golden chandeliers hung like stars. Tables overflowed with exotic fruits, honeyed meats, and goblets of ruby wine.
But hidden beneath the beauty was a deadly secret.
King Rodmar invited the nobles not to celebrate, but to destroy them. For years, they plotted against him, withholding taxes, forming alliances, even discussing rebellion. He smiled through every insult, every slight, but he never forgot. So he arranged a wedding for his eldest son, knowing every noble would attend out of pride, curiosity, or fear of exclusion. The trap was simple. Bring them inside. Feed them. Praise them. Then end them. As the feast reached its highest joy, Rodmar raised a jeweled cup. His voice boomed. To unity. But unity was just a word.
Suddenly, the hall's iron gate slammed shut.
Archers on hidden balconies aimed their black-feathered arrows. Heavy chains dropped from the ceiling, sealing exits. Poisoned incense drifted from burning braziers. Panic erupted. Some nobles fought. Others begged.
Many collapsed where they stood. But Rodmar watched with cold satisfaction.
Only one person tried to stop him. Princess Selene, the bride. She threw herself between her father and the chaos, screaming for mercy. But mercy had no place in Rodmar's heart. By dawn, the power of the noble houses was broken forever. The feast became a graveyard, and Selene never forgave the father who turned her wedding into a slaughter. On the day of her wedding, young Marion thought she was stepping into a life of honor and love. Her groom, Prince Alistair, was gentle, well-spoken, and admired throughout the kingdom. She believed she was marrying into safety. But she was wrong. King Ulrich, her future father-in-law, had different intentions. He feared Marion's family. House Redwyn was growing too powerful. If she married Alistair peacefully, the alliance would strengthen them beyond control. So he decided to break the alliance by breaking the bride. During the ceremony, Marion spoke her vows with trembling joy. She believed her future was bright. At the same time, Assassins hired by Ulrich hid beneath the choir loft, waiting for the king's signal. Alistair sensed something off the king's stiff posture, his unreadable expression, the too many guards at the back. He reached for Marian's hand, squeezing it tighter, as if trying to protect her from a danger she didn't see. When the final vow was spoken, Ulrich lifted his scepter, the signal to kill. But Alistair acted first. He pulled Marian behind him, drew a hidden dagger from his robes, and hurled it toward the loft. Screams erupted as the blade struck one assassin. The others attacked, but palace guards loyal to Alistair retaliated. The sacred hall turned into a battleground. Alistair fought like a man possessed, refusing to let harm touch his bride. Marian realized in that moment he truly loved her enough to turn against his own father. When the chaos ended, Ulrich's plan failed. But the kingdom would never be the same. The kingdom rejoiced when Commander Terran married Lady Celestine. He was the realm's greatest warrior. She was the daughter of a respected statesman. Their union symbolized hope and stability. But hope is fragile in the hands of greedy men. As the newlyweds shared their first kiss beneath strings of glowing lanterns, a loud crash echoed through the hall. The doors burst open and armed soldiers flooded in. Not Theron's soldiers, but the private army of Lord Varric, a rival desperate for control.
Celestine screamed as Vorik strode in, smiling with wicked confidence.
"Arrest the groom,"
he ordered.
"and bring the bride to me." But he underestimated the pair. Terran grabbed a fallen spear and launched into battle, his movements precise and lethal. Celestine shocked everyone when she dashed toward a wall, pulled down a hidden sword, and joined the fight, revealing a secret training she'd kept even from her own family. Together, they fought like a storm. Guests fled under tables, overturned benches, and tried to escape as swords clashed and flames toppled from chandeliers. Vorik tried to grab Celestine, but she slashed across his arm, forcing him back. Terran cornered him, blade at his throat. "You ruined our wedding," he growled. "And your kingdom," Varric whispered. Before Terran could strike, Varric's last soldiers fired crossbows and dragged him away, escaping through a broken wall. The wedding survived. The love survived. But a deadly war had just begun. Jealousy is a quiet poison, and in the kingdom of Eldervale, it killed faster than steel. When Princess Isolde married Sir Theron, a knight known for his courage and unmatched loyalty, the noble lords were furious. Many of them had tried for years to win her hand, offering land, gold, even armies, and each was rejected. Their pride cracked, their jealousy burned. At the grand wedding feast, the lords acted friendly, smiling, raising goblets, offering blessings. But beneath their robes, they hid daggers dipped in a rare poison called Moon's Bite, a toxin known to kill within minutes. Their plan was simple. Kill Theron in front of Isolde, blame a rival house, start a civil war. But they miscalculated one thing. Isolde was not just a princess. She was a strategist, trained by her war genius mother. As musicians played and guests danced, Isolde noticed a strange pattern, the jealous lords whispering too often. Their hands slipping under their cloaks, their eyes darting to Theron. She signaled her guards in silence. When the lords lunged, daggers glinting in torchlight, Isolde shouted, "Now!"
Her hidden royal guards charged in.
Swords flashed. Tables overturned. The wedding feast became a battlefield. Poisoned daggers clattered across the floor. The lords fought desperately, but Isolde made sure none escaped. By the end of the night, the wedding hall was filled with bodice, not flowers. Isolde stood beside her husband, victorious but shaken. She married for love. She killed for survival. The wedding of Duchess Alina and Lord Renwick was destined to be remembered, but not for romance. The ceremony was beautiful. Lanterns glowed like stars. Rare musicians played ancient harps, and nobles from every corner of the realm gathered to celebrate the long-awaited union between two powerful houses. But someone else had plans. A mysterious poisoner known only as the Whisperer infiltrated the kitchen hours before the feast. He slipped a lethal toxin into the royal wine barrels, a poison with no taste, no smell, and no cure. His goal, Kill every noble who opposed his master's rise to power. At the height of the celebration, servants poured wine into golden goblets. The bride and groom raised their cups. Hundreds of guests followed. As Duke Harland lifted his toast, the hall echoed, "To peace and unity." They drank. Seconds later, chaos erupted. Nobles collapsed, clutching their throats. Servants screamed. Children wailed. The musicians dropped their instruments as bodies fell across the dance floor like cut strings.
Lord Renwick realized the truth instantly. Someone wanted to erase both families. But Alina was faster. She grabbed Renwick's arm and dragged him behind the throne as guards formed a shield around them.
She ordered her healers to search for survivors, though she already knew there would be few. By dawn, half the court was dead. The kingdom mourned, but Alina grew cold, calculating. She vowed to hunt the Whisperer and every enemy who dared use her wedding as a graveyard. The kingdom of Taranth had been peaceful for decades. But beneath the surface, rebellion simmered. Lord Kale, the groom, pretended loyalty to the king. But secretly, he led a faction that planned to overthrow the crown. His wedding to Princess Roswyn was the perfect opportunity. During the ceremony, Kale's men hid weapons under their ceremonial robes. They planned to strike the moment the priest announced them husband and wife.
Roswyn sensed something off.
Kale's face was pale, tense. His fingers shook slightly. Not with love, but with anticipation. She remembered warnings whispered by palace spies, but she desperately wanted to believe they were wrong. Then came the moment. By the powers of the realm, the priest declared, "I join you!" Kale snapped his fingers. Dozens of rebels threw off their robes and drew swords. Guests screamed. Knights rushed forward. The hall turned into a battlefield within seconds. Despite the chaos, Roswyn fought her way to Kale, grabbing a fallen dagger. "Why?" she cried. "For freedom," Kale said coldly. "For a new kingdom? You chose this? On our wedding day?" No day is more symbolic. Their duel was heartbreaking. Two hearts once aligned now torn apart. Kale's blade grazed her arm. She struck his shoulder. In the end, she stabbed him through the chest, as tears blurred her vision. The coup failed, but Roswyn lost her husband and her innocence. In the same moment.
The kingdom of Taranth had been peaceful for decades, but beneath the surface, rebellion simmered. Lord Kale, the groom, pretended loyalty to the king, but secretly he led a faction that planned to overthrow the crown. His wedding to Princess Roswyn was the perfect opportunity. During the ceremony, Kale's men hid weapons under their ceremonial robes. They planned to strike the moment the priest announced them husband and wife. Roswyn sensed something off. Kale's face was pale, tense. His fingers shook slightly, not with love, but with anticipation. She remembered warnings whispered by palace spies, but she desperately wanted to believe they were wrong. Then came the moment. By the powers of the realm, the priest declared, "I join you." Kale snapped his fingers. Dozens of rebels threw off their robes and drew swords. Guests screamed, knights rushed forward. The hall turned into a battlefield within seconds. Despite the chaos, Roswyn fought her way to Kale, grabbing a fallen dagger. "Why?" she cried. "For freedom," Kale said coldly. "For a new kingdom. You chose this. On our wedding day. No day is more symbolic." Their duel was heartbreaking. Two hearts once aligned, now torn apart. Kale's blade grazed her arm. She struck his shoulder. In the end, she stabbed him through the chest as tears blurred her vision. The coup failed, but Roswyn lost her husband and her innocence. In the same moment, Queen Merwin was forced into marriage with King Edric, a tyrant feared across the realm. She hated him for his cruelty, his greed, and the hundreds he'd executed without cause. But she knew one thing: if she survived the wedding night, the kingdom would suffer forever. So she planned what no queen had dared before. On the night of the wedding, as servants filled the chamber with candles and roses, Merwin hid a small vial in her sleeve, a rare potion that didn't kill but paralyzed the victim completely, leaving them conscious yet powerless. Edric entered, drunk with triumph. He thought he had won. He didn't know he had already lost. Merwin poured him wine with trembling hands, pretending to be timid. He drank greedily. Moments later, his body froze. His eyes widened with horror as he fell to the floor. "You took my freedom," she whispered. "Now I take your throne." With the help of loyal guards, she staged his death as an accident. By morning, she wore the crown not as a victim, but as the kingdom's new ruler. The shocking truth remained hidden for centuries. Only her diary revealed it later. "I married a tyrant. I buried a tyrant, and I saved a kingdom in one night." Lady Morwenna was known for her beauty, but beauty was her disguise. Underneath the lace veil, she hid a face hardened by tragedy. Her family was murdered years earlier by the very man she was forced to marry. Lord Harrod, a cruel ruler with a thirst for power. She pretended to accept the marriage, pretended to be obedient, pretended she had forgiven the past. But her wedding veil was not a symbol of purity. It was a symbol of revenge. As she walked down the aisle, her fingers brushed against the thin blade sewn into the fabric of her gown. Every step brought her closer to the man who destroyed her life. Harrod smiled proudly, unaware of the storm beneath the silk. When the priest asked them to join hands, Morwenna stepped closer and whispered, "Do you remember my mother's screams?" Before he could react, she drew the hidden blade and plunged it into his heart. Gasps exploded across the hall. Knights rushed forward. Guests fled. The priest stumbled back in terror. Harrod collapsed at her feet, blood staining her gown. Morwenna did not run. She raised her chin proudly. "I accept the consequences," she said, "but I will no longer live under the man who murdered my family." The kingdom erupted in chaos, but many secretly celebrated. Harrod had ruled with cruelty, and Morwenna had delivered justice where no one else dared. Her veil fell to the floor, white silk-soaked red, a symbol of freedom.
The wedding of Lord Edric was supposed to be the grandest ceremony the kingdom had ever seen. Nobles from distant lands arrived, dressed in shimmering silks. Musicians tuned their instruments, and the bride waited behind curtains, trembling with nervous joy. But the groom never reached the altar. Moments before the ceremony, Edric walked down the royal garden path toward the cathedral. Sunlight glimmered on the flowers. Birds sang above the towering hedges. Everything seemed perfect until he noticed a shadow that didn't belong. A hooded man stepped onto the path.
"Lord Edric," he said softly, "your sins have finally returned." Before Edric could draw his sword,
3 more men emerged from the hedges, surrounding him. They were from a family Edric had destroyed years ago. a secret he'd never confessed, not even to his bride. He tried to flee toward the hall, but the assassins blocked him. Steel clashed. Blood stained the garden stones. Edric fought desperately, shouting for help, but the ceremony's music drowned his cries. Inside, the bride waited and waited, unaware her groom was battling for his life just meters away. One assassin struck Edric through the ribs. He collapsed, gasping, staring at the cathedral where his future should have begun. The assassins vanished before the guards arrived. When the doors opened and the bride walked down the aisle, the whispers began. The groom is missing. He never came. Something terrible happened. Hours later, Edric's blood-soaked body was found beneath a rose archway. The wedding turned into a funeral, and the bride learned the truth. Sometimes the past kills faster than love can save. Putin's wedding was meant to symbolize peace between two rival kingdoms. The grand courtyard was decorated with banners of gold and crimson, representing unity after decades of hatred. Citizens filled the streets. Soldiers stood proudly. The air buzzed with hope.
But under that hope, rebellion stirred.
Just as Kalen and his bride stepped onto the ceremonial platform, a flock of doves was released into the sky, the traditional signal of blessing. But this time, it was a signal for war. Hidden atop the surrounding rooftops, rebel archers drew their bows. They had disguised themselves as festival performers, waiting for the exact moment when everyone looked upward. Kalen felt the shift. A breath, too. Still. A silence too sharp. He grabbed his bride and dove behind a stone fountain.
Arrows rained down. Guards scrambled. Civilians screamed.
The courtyard erupted into chaos. The rebels targeted the king, but Kalen refused to let his father die.
He fought through the crowd, shield raised, deflecting deadly shafts while dragging the king to safety.
The bride's brothers, fierce warrior twins, leaped into battle, cutting down attackers with brutal efficiency. Within minutes, smoke filled the air, soldiers clashed on balconies, and flames licked the edges of the decorative tapestries. When the final rebel fell, the courtyard was unrecognizable. Blood splattered across wedding banners, broken tables burning, doves dead on the stones.
Kalen stood in the middle of the devastation, breathing heavily, holding his bride close. Their marriage survived.
Their peace treaty didn't. It was the kind of wedding people talked about for months. A hall filled with diamonds, golden tapestries, and the most powerful nobles from 3 kingdoms. The bride, Lady Arlen, smiled gracefully as she walked among guests who praised her beauty and charm. But she saw something others didn't. Fear. Her father, Duke Fenris, was unusually tense. Extra guards stood near the doors, and the hall's windows normally opened for festivities were sealed shut with iron bars. Arlen pulled her father aside. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Nothing," he lied. The truth arrived moments later. During the feast, the hall's doors slammed shut with a thunderous clang.
The guards turned their swords inward, not outward. Gasps echoed. What is the meaning of this?
"Nobody's a demandetto." Duke Fenris stepped forward. "Tonight," he declared, "we remove every traitor who plots against House Fenris." Rebellion erupted inside the hall. Nobles who had schemed against the Duke drew hidden blades. Others hid under tables. Ladies screamed. Servants fled, and the once beautiful hall became a war. Arlen watched the horror unfold. The betrayal, the slaughter, the realization that her father had planned the massacre for months. Blood splashed across gowns that had taken weeks to sew. Chandeliers crashed to the floor. The music stopped, replaced by steel and screams. When the battle ended, Fenris stood triumphant. Over a pile of corpses, Arlen realized her marriage was not about love. It was about power. And tonight, her family showed they would kill anyone to keep it. The midnight feast was a tradition, a secret banquet held after every royal wedding, attended only by the closest allies and family. Prince Odrin and Lady Valesia sat at the long candlelit table, surrounded by loved ones who toasted their future. But midnight is where shadows reveal themselves. Valesia noticed something strange. servants she didn't recognize, guards she had never seen, and a cold tension in Audrun's father, King Tor. Then, halfway through the feast, Torvald stood. His expression was solemn, almost mournful. "My son," he said, "I've made a difficult decision." Audrun frowned. "Father, what are you?" Torvald slammed his fist on the table. "Kill the Bry! Bareshia Fudos!" The guards unsheathed their swords. Adrian leapt to shield her. "Father, stop!" he shouted. "She is a spy," Torvald growled, "sent by the Western Empire. Her marriage is the first step in their conquest." Valesia shook her head. "That's a lie." But Torvald was convinced, or pretending to be. The guards attacked. Audrun fought like a madman, shoving Valesia toward a hidden back passage only he knew. Plates shattered. Torches fell. The hall roared with betrayal.
One guard cornered Valesia, raising his blade, but Audrun threw himself in front of it.
It pierced his chest. "No!" Valesia screamed. She dragged him into the passage, blood trailing behind them. Torvald's shouts echoed through the corridor. Audrun died in her arms, and Valesia swore her love would become vengeance, a promise whispered into the darkness of the night. For decades, the kingdoms of Rathmore and Valyria were bitter enemies. Their marriage alliance, Princess Kira and Prince Thalin, was meant to end generations of war. But not everyone wanted peace. During the wedding feast, representatives from both kingdoms gathered in a grand torchlit hall. Laughter filled the air. Wine flowed freely. The atmosphere was warm. Too warm. Because the wine was drugged. Slowly, guests began to slump forward, dizzy, confused. Thalin realized something was wrong when a servant collapsed beside him, eyes rolling back. He grabbed Kira's arm. "Don't drink," he whispered. Moments later, black-cloaked soldiers burst from hidden passages. They weren't from either kingdom. They belonged to a secret faction that thrived on conflict and profited from war. Their goal was simple: slaughter everyone, blame both kingdoms, reignite war. Kira and Thalin ducked behind a fallen table as soldiers stabbed helpless guests. Flames erupted as banners caught fire. The hall turned into a nightmare of smoke, screams, and steel. They fled together, through the kitchens, down the servant stairs, out into the cold night. Behind them, the hall burned to ashes. Both kingdoms blamed each other. War returned. But Kira and Thalin knew the truth, and they swore to expose the faction that destroyed their wedding and murdered countless innocents. Their love had survived, but their world had been set on fire. King Aaron wanted his son's wedding to be the grandest in generations. Flowers from foreign lands hung from balconies, fountains overflowed with wine, and nobles filled the hall in shimmering gowns. But beneath the celebration lay a secret only the king knew. He planned to murder his own council. For years, the council had manipulated him, controlling decisions, weakening his power, and plotting to remove him once his son ascended the throne.
Aaron pretended ignorance, but inside, he burned with rage.
And the wedding gave him the perfect audience. During the ceremony, as the priest recited blessings, guards quietly sealed every exit. The guests applauded the vows, unaware that the king's assassins waited behind the curtains. When the final vow echoed, Aaron raised his goblet. "My beloved council," he said, smiling coldly. "Today marks not only a union of hearts, but the cleansing of my kingdom." Before the council could react, assassins stormed the platform. Crossbows fired. Poisoned needles flew. Screams filled the sacred hall. The king watched, without blinking. The bride clung to the groom. Horrified, the groom shouted at his father, "Stop this madness!" But Aaron didn't stop. Didn't flinch. Didn't remorse. When the massacre ended, 13 council members lay dead, their blood soaking the ceremonial carpets. Aaron turned to his son.
"Now," he said calmly, "you inherit a kingdom free of traitors."
The wedding entered history not as a celebration, but as the murder ceremony. Princess Ivana's wedding feast shimmered with beauty, golden bowls, silver chalices, and tables piled with enough food to feed villages. But her heart raced with dread. For weeks, she sensed danger. She was right. In the shadows, her jealous half-brother, Lord Varro, plotted to claim the throne. Ivana was older, the rightful heir, and her marriage threatened Varro's claim. So he bribed the royal cupbearers, slipping a deadly potion into every chalice except his own.
When the feast reached its height, Varro raised his goblet.
"To my beautiful sister," he said, fake smile plastered on his face, and to her long, happy reign. Guests raised their cups. "Ebana Hurozu."
She noticed something subtle. Varro didn't sip.
His eyes watched the crowd instead of her. A chill raced through her blood. Before anyone could drink, Ivana slapped the cup from her husband's hand. It shattered, spilling the wine across the table. The liquid hissed. Smoke rose. People gasped. "It's poison!" she cried. Panic exploded like wildfire. Guests flung their cups away. Some collapsed, having already tasted a drop. Others scrambled to escape. Guards seized Varro, who tried to run, shouting, "This kingdom is mine!" Ivana faced him, her voice cold. "You killed our people for power. Now you will face their justice."
Varro was dragged away to the dungeons. The feast was ruined. But Ivana survived.
And her throne was now secured by bloodshed. From the outside, the wedding of Lady Cerelith looked magical. Lanterns floated like stars, musicians played soft strings, and the couple looked like a tale carved into legend. But the killers had already entered. They disguised themselves as servants, musicians, dancers, slipping in quietly, blending with the celebration. Their target wasn't the bride or groom. It was Cerelith's father, Lord Thalin, a man who had crossed too many kingdoms. Cerelith sensed danger first, when she saw a dancer with unfamiliar tattoos, then a servant carrying wine who avoided eye contact, and a musician whose instrument wasn't tuned because it wasn't an instrument at all. It hid a blade. Moments before the ceremony ended, the dancers formed a circle, not for performance, but for attack. The first assassin lunged at Lord Thalin. Steel flashed. Guests screamed. Chaos erupted as hidden blades slashed the air. The killers moved with terrifying precision, eliminating guards before they could react. Cerelith grabbed her groom and ducked behind pillars. Arrows whistled past. Tables overturned. The ground became slick with blood.
Lord Thalin fought fiercely but was outnumbered. When an assassin's blade neared his throat, Cerelith shot an arrow, her aim perfect, saving him at the last second.
The remaining attackers fled into the night. The wedding was beautiful, but beneath the beauty, death had danced freely. Lady Isolde smiled sweetly as she walked down the aisle, her gown shimmering like frost, her eyes calm and warm. But her smile was a mask. Behind it lay a secret she had carried for years, a secret powerful enough to reshape the entire kingdom. She wasn't marrying Prince Alden out of love. She was marrying him to kill his father. King Roald had murdered her parents when she was a child, destroying her home and forcing her into hiding. She spent years training with assassins, perfecting every art of silent death. Now she stood in the palace that once ruined her life. During the wedding feast, she slipped away under the guise of retouching her gown. She walked through the golden corridors, her fingers brushing the hidden blade strapped to her thigh. She entered the king's private chamber. He turned to greet her, but froze when he saw the blade. "You," he whispered. "You're her daughter." Isolde's hand didn't tremble. Not once. She struck quickly, ending the tyrant who had destroyed her childhood. But fate twisted. Alden, the groom, kind, gentle, and innocent, walked in at the same moment, his eyes filled with shock and betrayal. Isolde lowered her blade, tears burning her eyes. "I didn't come for you," she whispered. "I came for justice." Alden didn't call the guards. He let her walk away. Because, deep down, he knew his father deserved it. For decades, the fortress of Averon had been considered impenetrable, the safest place in the realm. So when Princess Lyria chose it as her wedding venue, the nobles sighed with relief. What could possibly go wrong in Ivan? They boasted. Everything. During the reception, as guests danced and laughed, the fortress gates slammed shut with a deafening boom. Chains rattled. Heavy iron bars locked into place. The guards turned their swords inward. Gasps erupted. What is this? Open the gates! Are we prisoners? Hennadel Fuldrick, the king's most trusted commander, stepped forward. No one leaves, he announced, by order of the king!
The king appeared behind him, eyes cold.
For years, traitors have hidden among my allies, he said. Tonight, the truth is revealed. A map was unrolled, marked with symbols of betrayal. The king began naming nobles he suspected of plotting against him. Those who protested were silenced by blades. Lyria watched in horror. This is my wedding, she cried. Not a trial, but the king didn't listen. Guards dragged nobles from their seats. Some fought, some begged. Some fell to the floor as steel struck mercilessly.
Blood pooled across the stone.
The fortress became a prison of death. Lyria realized her father would do anything, even destroy her wedding, to keep his throne. That night, she made a vow stronger than any ring. She would bring down the king, even if that king was her own father. The wedding of Lord Caris and Lady Elaine was held inside the Sapphire Hall, the most secure chamber in the kingdom. Walls lined with enchanted stone, guards stationed at every corner, and guests personally vetted by the king himself. Everyone believed it was the safest place in the realm. They had no idea the danger was already inside.
As the ceremony began, guests chatted, drank fine wine, and admired Elaine's beauty.
But Caris noticed something strange. One guest sitting near the back, face partially hidden, who wasn't on the original invitation list. Before he could investigate, the hall doors slammed shut. Light torches flickered, and the guest stood up. He removed his hood, revealing the scarred face of the kingdom's most feared assassin. Vorik the Phantom. Gasps erupted. You all made a fatal mistake, Vorik said calmly. You thought walls could protect you. Chaos exploded. Guards lunged forward, but Vorik moved like a shadow, slicing through them with lethal precision. Guests ducked under tables. Couples screamed. Chandeliers crashed to the floor. Caris pushed Elaine behind a pillar. Why is he here? She cried. To kill the king, Caris whispered. And indeed, Vorik's eyes were locked on the monarch seated on the throne, but Caris wouldn't let his wedding become a royal execution. He grabbed a fallen spear and charged. Vorik countered with terrifying skill. Steel clashed. Sparks flew. Guests crawled across the floor trying to escape. Finally, Caris managed a blow that sent Vorik crashing into a column. Guards swarmed and chained him. The danger passed. But not the fear. Everyone realized the same truth that night. No hall is safe when betrayal walks through the door. Princess Allura believed her wedding to Duke Rohan would end political tension and restore peace. The great hall shimmered with silver curtains, crystal dishes, and thousands of candles that glowed like stars. Guests from every noble house filled the long tables. Too perfect, too peaceful, too calm, because hidden within the celebration was an army. Rowan's army. For months he had planned treason. The wedding was just camouflage. His soldiers disguised themselves as cooks, musicians, servants, and guests. Their weapons were hidden under trays, inside instrument cases, even inside hollowed-out wine barrels. Allura had no idea. But her younger brother, Prince Duran, noticed the musicians' odd uniforms, and the fact that some guests didn't know the names of the families they claimed to belong to. Just before the vows, Duran approached Allura. Something is wrong, he whispered. She didn't believe him. Not until Rowan's men silently moved into formation around the king's. The moment the priest said, "Do you take Rohan?" raised 2 fingers. The signal, his hidden army drew blades. Screams erupted. Nobles dove under tables. Knights clashed steel with disguised soldiers. Duran shoved Alora behind a marble pillar as arrows flew over their heads.
Rowan climbed atop the throne.
"By dawn," he shouted, "I will be king." But he underestimated Alora.
She seized a fallen sword, rallied loyal guards, and launched a counterattack, so fierce Rowan's men panicked.
Within minutes, Rohan was overwhelmed. Alora stood over him. "You wanted a crown," she said coldly. "Instead, you'll die at my wedding." And she kept her promise. King Demira's wedding was whispered about for centuries, a ceremony so drenched in betrayal and death that storytellers refused to speak of it on stormy nights. Demir was a tyrant feared across 7 kingdoms. His bride, Lady Mirian, was a political offering, not a lover. She walked down the aisle trembling, knowing she was marrying a man who executed hundreds without hesitation. But the wedding was destined to become more than a tragedy. It was an execution ground. Not for the king, but by the king. During the feast, Demir stood and addressed his guests with a smile too sharp to be sincere. "My dear friends," he announced, "tonight we celebrate loyalty, and tonight we punish betrayal." Guests stiffened.
Without warning, Dimmer clapped twice. Hidden soldiers stormed the hall, dragging out nobles he accused of conspiring against him.
Marianne stared in horror as people begged, screamed, and tried to flee. One noble shouted, "We never plotted against you!" Dimmer laughed. "Perhaps. But better to kill you now than regret it later." He ordered the executions on the spot. Blood soaked the marble. The hall echoed with agony. Marianne realized she could not survive beside a monster like Demir. That night, she sought out the royal alchemist, begging for something, anything that could end his reign. The alchemist gave her a single vial. Hours later, when Demir drank his ceremonial wine, he gasped, clutching his throat, collapsing at her feet. Marianne watched with cold determination. And history remembered. The king who spilled blood at his own wedding died by the bride's hand. The bells of High Castle rang with unmatched joy. Villagers gathered below, cheering as Prince Arwen and Lady Sorel were finally united after years of secret romance. The sky was clear, the wind warm, the atmosphere full of hope. Hope died quickly. As soon as the priest declared them husband and wife, a deafening roar shook the banquet hall. Smoke exploded from the entrance. Screams filled the air as masked warriors stormed in, wielding curved blades. They belonged to the Shadow Legion, a group believed extinct.
Arwen grabbed Sorel's hand and pulled her behind a column as soldiers clashed with the attackers.
The Shadow Legion moved like ghosts, cutting down guards with terrifying speed.
Their leader, masked in obsidian armor, pointed at the groom.
"Kill the prince!"
"Leave the bride alive." Sorel's blood ran cold. Why spare her?
She soon discovered the truth. She had royal blood stronger than and the Shadow Legion wanted her to rule as their puppet. Arwen refused to let that happen. He fought through the chaos, shielding Sorel with his own body. Arrows flew, tables split, torches crashed to the ground. One masked warrior cornered Sorel, blade raised, but Arwen intercepted the strike, taking the wound himself. He fell. Sorel screamed, grabbed the fallen warrior's sword, and struck with desperate fury. Her rage turned into strength no one expected. The attackers fled. Arwen survived, barely, but Sorel changed that day. When the bells rang again, the kingdom no longer saw her as a delicate bride, but as the warrior who turned her wedding into a battlefield.